John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago, Illinois on the 17th of March 1942. The second of three children, Gacy had a difficult upbringing. His father was an alcoholic who was reportedly both mentally and physically abusive to his children and their mother.
His father spent apparently all of Gacy's childhood demeaning him and physically punishing him and telling him how stupid and worthless and effeminate he was.
Gacy's childhood friend Barry Buscelli remembers the physical abuse he suffered at the hands of his father.
If Johnny was 2 minutes late, no food. So a lot of times Johnny ate at our house and stayed at our house overnight. He used to take Johnny when he was sitting at the kitchen table, and he would take his fist and hit Johnny in the face.
The father is a very significant figure in the genesis of Gacy's terrible deeds. For, to my mind, Gacy was always trying to satisfy his father, whom he never could. He was beaten repeatedly by his father, with belts, with brooms. At one stage he was knocked out by him.
These people grow up with such a malignant view of the world and of human relationships, and feeling that human relationships are not based on love and trust and respect, that they're all based on exploitation and cruelty and inflicting pain.
Gacy was a sickly child. He suffered from a heart condition, limiting his involvement in sports activities and consequently alienating him from his peers. Aged 11, an accident in a playground led to his teenage years being blighted by blackouts and hospital visits.
At that time, the swings were wooden base swings with heavy chains coming down. Johnny went to grab it, and the swing clipped him right across the forehead and knocked him to the ground.
By 1966, 24-year-old Gacy was married and had relocated to the city of Waterloo, 300 miles west of Chicago, in the neighboring state of Iowa.
Well, Gacy got married and life from the outside appeared to be relatively normal. He had quite a good job. His wife had 2 children. So they appeared to be the typical cereal box American nuclear family. And Gacy wasn't just a regular family man. He was also quite active in the local Chamber of Commerce, and he played quite an active role. And he was a real figure in the local community.
Gacy had started to build the perfect life for himself, but he was concealing a dark secret. He developed an unhealthy sexual interest in young boys.
There was a son of a fellow JC member who he lured back to his home and he sexually assaulted. So he's abusing power. He's getting into these positions of trust and he's taking advantage, and that's a theme that's going to continue for him.
And then when the kid revealed this to his father, and Gacy was arrested for it, Gacy hired another teenager to intimidate this kid, to lure this kid into some remote place and spray mace in his eyes and beat him up and warn him against testifying in Gacy's case.
Despite Gacy's efforts, his victim still testified, but there wasn't conclusive proof of an attack. Therefore, police were only able to charge him with sodomy of the 15-year-old boy.
He pleaded guilty to 1 count of sodomy, thinking he would get a very, very minimal sentence. But the judge threw the book at him, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
On the 3rd of December 1968, Gacy was sent to Anamosa State Penitentiary.
Gacy actually handcuffs himself and turns around and struggles with the handcuffs, and then turns back and he holds the handcuffs up. And Peast is pretty amazed at that, and he said, well, that's neat, how'd you do that? So Gacy says, well, here, you handcuff yourself, and I'll show you how to do that. So Peast handcuffs himself, and he struggles, and he struggles, and he struggles. And he looks at Gacy and he says, now, what's the trick to this? And Gacy reaches in his pocket and pulls out a key to the handcuffs, and he says, the trick is, you gotta have this key.
This handcuff trick was part of an horrific yet clinical MO.
Gacy, throughout all of the 33 killings, had developed a method of killing these young kids.
He would pick up these victims. Some were kids who worked for him, but most were teenage runaways, and bring them back to his house and giving them drinks. He would sort of trick them into handcuffing themselves or being handcuffed.
Gacy would use chloroform to subdue his victims. Chloroform's an old-fashioned anaesthetic, really, so it gets into your lungs and it just renders you unconscious very effectively.
He did what he called the rope trick. And when he had these young kids incapacitated like that, he would slip a rope over their neck, a knotted rope like a loop, and then put the stick in the back like a tourniquet, and he would slowly turn the tourniquet. And he said he had it perfected so well that he knew exactly how the body would react to each half turn.
Putting a ligature around the neck, the first thing it's going to block is the blood vessels, so it prevents blood getting to the brain, prevents it getting back to the body from the brain. It's going to be very uncomfortable, and it can even render you unconscious in a small number of seconds.
And he went into detail on how he would torture these young men. And he, in fact, did double and triple murders. He would incapacitate 2 or 3 people at a time and kill one person in front of the other victims, and then continue to kill the other victims. And he seemed to be pretty proud of that. We used that to our advantage to keep him talking, and he described every killing to a T, exactly how it happened, all 33.
As the news broke across the country, one shocked viewer who'd unknowingly experienced Gacy's MO firsthand was his ex-employee, Tony Antonucci. Whilst working for PDM, Tony had accidentally got a nail stuck in his foot.
John took me and I got a tetanus shot and took me home. And he came over later that evening to check on if I was okay, or that was the theory, but he also had, some wine, and we were drinking, and he was kind of joking around. It was probably 10:30 at night. I was a high school wrestler, and he said, "Oh, you're a big wrestler guy," and he started wrestling around with me. He got my left arm, and he got it behind me, and I felt him put a handcuff on it. I kept flailing my right hand around so that he couldn't get my right arm, but eventually he did get a hold of my right arm, and he knocked me down to the floor with my hands behind me. He left the room for a few minutes, and I realized that if I pulled really hard on my right hand, that I could pull my hand through the handcuff. I could get it out.
By pretending he was still handcuffed, Tony was able to catch Gacy unawares when he returned and turn the situation to his advantage.
I took the handcuff that I had gotten out of, and I handcuffed him on one of his wrists, and I reached into his pocket, got the key, and I handcuffed him behind his back, laying face down. He goes, "You're the only one that not only got out of the handcuffs, you got them on me." And I didn't know what that meant. I thought that this was some type of test that he had performed before. And I let him stay handcuffed for 10 or 15 minutes before I let him out of the handcuffs. And, he had previously agreed that when I let him up, he would leave. And he did.
Tony had no idea just how close he'd come to being another victim of this deadly killer. On the 21st of December 1978, they searched Gacy's home on West Somerdale Avenue for the second time.
When they executed that search warrant, they went in the crawl space, and the very first shovel that they dug, they found human remains.
Police had finally unearthed the secrets that Gacy had thought would stay buried forever.
So they immediately called me, let me know that there was human remains in a crawl space, and at that time I arrested John Gacy for murder. Gacy says he wants to confess, but really he wants to confess to the surveillance team, both myself and my partner and the other team. And now all of a sudden he's got an audience again, and he's on top of the world. And he knows he can't get out of it at this point, and so he might as well just divulge everything that actually happened.
Gacy told detectives he was willing to draw a map of the burial site beneath his home.
I gave him a pen, and he started right up. He squared it off in the thing, and he started, well, this was a double, and this was a triple, and this was the first guy with put an X on it. Went around the whole crawl space with these places where the body was buried. I mean, they were digging with spoons and everything, but they obviously identified where all the bodies were, and they did an overlay of where the bodies were actually found compared to that diagram that he made, and it was unbelievable. It was right on the money.
In total, 27 bodies were discovered in Gacy's crawl space. It wouldn't take long for news of this horrific discovery to filter out to the wider world.
Then the arrest came down, and that was the headline on the local papers, everything, how many bodies they took out of Gacy's basement.
Well, you know, when Gacy's crimes were uncovered, he entered into the record books, you know, as America's most prolific serial murderer. The notion that this, you know, pudgy, normal-seeming, decent, regular, ordinary guy was living in this horror house, you know, that was just suffused with the stench of death, and that there were the rotting bodies of 27 young men in his crawl space, bringing home and torturing young boys right in the midst, you know, of all his neighbors, and then going off to work the next day.
When we booked him for murder, we asked Gacy where he was born. And Gacy looked at us and said, "I was born in a state of confusion." And he smiled like that, and we captured the photo.
In total, Gacy confessed to the murder of 33 young men and boys between 1972 and 1978.